Oh, it's so sweet. I love colors on the mountain dulcimer. And we've got such a wide variety of colors that are right there underneath your fingertips at all times. Welcome to Dulcimerica, everybody. My name is Bing Futch. Thank you for joining me. This is the sixth and final episode in a 6-week series looking at building chords and how to use these chords. And we've been through a whole bunch of really interesting flavors, haven't we? We started off with your basic chords, the major and minor chords. Then we got a little fancy and did the suspended 2 and suspended 4 chord. Then we really got deep into it with the dominant 7th, followed by the major 7th and the minor 7th. And then most recently we looked at the 6th chord, both the major 6 or simply the 6th chord, and also the minor 6th chord. Well, we've got a couple today that are sort of the theoretical leftovers of everything else that we've looked at. But they're very, very functional, and once you get to know these two chords, you're going to be using them an awful lot. And they often sort of work like the 7th chords. Today we're talking about the diminished and the augmented chord, and they're a lot of fun, and in certain cases they can be kind of out there as well. But before we get into it, I want to say hello to one of my patrons on Patreon, Stephanie Hughley. Stephanie, thank you so very, very much for being a patron. I really appreciate everything that you guys do. Every single day when I wake up, I think, what can I do for my patrons? And I thank you for your support and being a part of my art, because it allows me to make videos like this. It also helps me to upgrade gear in the studio, get new software, and basically research and develop new content for everybody out there who's watching both Dulcimerica and, of course, Dulcimerica Deluxe. So Stephanie, thank you, and all my patrons, thank you very much. I've been having a great time sharing stuff from the new album with you, and I'm looking forward to doing some more of that this week. As I do every week, plenty of new stuff besides just the archival footage, I guess you could call it. For those of you not familiar with Patreon, it's a platform for artists to connect with their fans. And I'm on there with all of my music, books, CDs, videos, tablature, a lot of stuff behind the scenes, tons and tons of performance and educational videos. And every week I do new content as well, like Mailbag Monday and Dulcimerica, of course. So if you're interested in seeing what it's all about, please come on down to patreon.com/BingFutch. Scroll past all the sign-up stuff because you can go right into the open house section and download all kinds of stuff for free. And once you taste it, try it, and see if you like it, please do consider becoming a patron like Stephanie. Again, Stephanie, thank you very much. So before we get into these two chords, I want to take a look back at our intervals. Of course, intervals are the distances between notes. It's how we measure the distance between this note over here and this note over here. Intervals can be very, very close. Intervals can also be very far apart. And understanding how the intervals work, how they sound, and how they kind of look on paper is very, very important when you start getting into playing different types of chords. Because really what we're doing is we're simply connecting, adding, and subtracting different intervals to get different types of chords. So in the chromatic scale, there are 12 half steps. And we say D's, let's start with D, for example. Let's start with C. So we'll start with C, we go to C sharp, then D sharp, then E, then F. E and F are a half step apart, so there's no in the middle there, although you can and you will hear today about an E sharp. After F, F sharp, then G sharp, then A sharp, then B, and then it's a half step from B to C. Once again, you can hear about B sharp, but typically speaking, you don't. It's just a B to C, and that, of course, brings us right back to the beginning of that chromatic scale. Every single distance from the root or the tonic, which is C in this case, or C the other direction, every time you go to another note, like from C to C sharp, that is an interval, and that is an interval of a minor second. And then from C to D would be a major second. So every time we leave the root and then go up one more note, each one of those intervals has a name and it has a personality as well. So we've got our unison, which is basically the same note twice. We have minor second interval, major second. We have the minor third and the major third. Then we have the perfect fourth. It's perfect just the way it is. Then we've got the tritone, which is that really odd sounding interval that's a little scary. Then we've got the perfect fifth, again, not major or minor, just perfect the way it is. And then we get back into our pattern from minor 6 to major 6, and then from minor 7 to major 7. You can go back and check I forget which episode it is now off the top of my head, but one of these where I actually brought out the melodica and played all of those different intervals. It is one of these. I don't remember which one. I'll put it on the screen so you can go look at it though. All right, so all of those intervals. Out of all of those intervals, we basically are only working with the major second, and for a major scale, the major second, the major third, the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, the major sixth, and the major seventh. Those are all the intervals that make up the major scale. And those are the ones that we're typically playing around with when we're doing major chords and things of that nature. Then with the minor scale, we're going to take notes 3, 6, and 7, and we're going to use the minor intervals. So the minor third, the minor sixth, and the flat seventh can be used for dominant seventh chords and things like that. So these are the notes that we're really, or the intervals that we're really focused on when we're building a lot of these chords. And the one thing I wanted to point out is that this pattern of major, minor applies to all except for the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. But you can alter those. And right in between the perfect fourth and perfect fifth is the tritone. But it also has another name. And we talked about inharmonic spellings, a chord that can be spelled, or an interval that can be spelled two different ways. But it's the same note or the same chord. So remember we talked about how when we're altering notes or intervals or whatever, we're going up, we're sharpening them, or we're going down, we're flattening them, a half step down or a half step up. So we can take that tritone and we can look at it in relationship to the perfect fourth, which is right below it. So we could augment the fourth interval. An augmented fourth would mean the tritone. We do the same thing with the perfect fifth. We diminish it, take it down a half step. That's going to give us a tritone as well. So we can alter the fourth and the fifth even though they are perfect. And why is that important today? Because we've got two chords that do a lot of alterations on the back end of the chord, which we haven't done a lot of. Let's start off with the diminished chord, which we've touched base on a little bit in our study of sevenths because we got into the half diminished seventh chord. This is just a basic diminished triad. And what we've got is the root, flat third, like a minor chord, and then we've got a flattened fifth or a diminished fifth as well. So it's an odd sounding chord. It sounds like this. And it occurs naturally when it's built off of the seventh scale degree of any key. So remember that hop, skip, and jump thing that we did? If you were to start with the seventh note of the D major scale, which is C sharp, and then do the hop, skip, and jump thing, you'd end up with C sharp, E, and G. And that makes your diminished chord. So we have a few of these that we can use in different places. We've got this one here at 6.5, 6, and 8. So there's our C sharp, there's our G, and then there's our E on the melody string. We also have a B diminished that we can get if you've got the 1.5 fret. So we got 1.5, 3rd fret, and then 5th fret. B, D, and F will give you a B diminished chord. And then we've got F sharp diminished, which you can play 4, 5, 6. And F sharp diminished is F sharp, A, and C natural. So they're kind of unusual sounding chords, and they've got that musical tension much like the dominant seventh. And they serve pretty much the same function. You can use them to resolve to the tonic of that related scale. So if we're in the key of D, that's the tonic, and we have our C sharp diminished. So that's going to resolve really nicely down to D major. Ooh, it's so cool. So it's just got a little bit more flavor, a little bit more tension than just a basic dominant seventh chord, which would be, you know, very, very basic, going to G. But this has got more, it's got more going on there. So it can resolve to the tonic. It can also, and let me show you a couple more of these. So in F sharp, we'd be in the key of G. F sharp diminished is built off of the seventh note of the G major scale. So if we play the F sharp diminished and then go to a G major, That's rather nice. Or we can do. And the one thing to look for is look for these little half step movements. So notice right here, we have our F sharp diminished. And then when I go ahead and move down into the D, this note is going to go down a half step from C to B. And we've got some really nice movement. If you can get 2 or more notes doing that thing, oh, it's so delicious. But you can also use the diminished chord as a substitute. So inside of this, for example, if I play Edelweiss, Edelweiss goes from the 1 chord to the 5 chord. So it goes from D to A major, back to D. So it goes back to the root from the 5 chord. A very, very strong and powerful resolution. So I can replace that A with a C sharp diminished. And what that does is it adds a bit more flavor. But why is it going to work for the A? That's cool, huh? And then watch as I go down to the D from here. So much resolution there, so much more powerful, I think, than just simply going from the 1 to the 5 back again. So why does that work? Why are we able to take the A and then remove it and substitute this C sharp diminished? It's not necessarily the relationship between the diminished chord and the 5 chord. Really what it's all about is the fact that A and C sharp diminished both share 2 notes, C sharp and E. And that's basically the rule of thumb when it comes to substituting 1 chord for another. If you share 2 notes between these chords, they're going to work harmonically very well. So that's a nice little nugget to kind of keep under your hat for fun in the future. All right, so there is some of those diminished chords all over the fretboard and how you can use them, and they are a lot of fun, and I hope you will use them instead of the dominant 7th from time and time again, just to make things a little bit more interesting. Now let's take a look at the mysterious augmented chord. So once again, diminished means we're taking it down a half step. Augmented means we're taking it up a half step, or we're sharpening it. So take the augmented triad, and that's going to be a root, your 1. That's going to be a 3rd, a major 3rd. And we're going to take the 5th up a half step. We're going to sharpen the 5th. So in the instance of A major with A, C sharp, and E, there's A, there's C sharp, there's E. And I got a half step right here, so I can go ahead and pull that E up a half a step to F. And there is the augmented chord. Oh, isn't that cool? For film composers, there would never be any music in space if we did not have the augmented chord, because every single space movie's got this. But it's good for a lot more than just space music, of course. So let's take a look at some of the ones that we've got here on the fretboard. We've got a C augmented. And we can play that 8, 6 1/2, 5. Sorry, not 8, 6 1/2, 5, 8, 6 1/2, 6. We have also got an F augmented, and with the 1 1/2 fret, you can get that 4, 2, 1 1/2. And if you are coming at from the perspective, of A, those 3 notes will also work for an A augmented. There's an F, A, and C sharp in an F augmented chord, and then A, C sharp, and E sharp in an A augmented chord. Now there's that E sharp, and basically it's an inharmonic way of saying F natural. And the reason we're saying that is because we're looking at the notes of the chord, or the notes of the scale that these are associated with, and so we want to use the appropriate sharps, flats, and so forth. And it can get a little confusing, but when you first start studying the scales, you'll see that sometimes we use inharmonic spellings just so we can stick with sharps or stick with flats when we're spelling out these chords. So what does the augmented chord do for us? Well, it can vary, and this is not a naturally occurring chord unless you're working with a harmonic minor scale, and we'll talk about that in another episode somewhere. But it is a fun chord that can be used in the place of a dominant seventh. It does really like to resolve back to the root, but it also can serve as a passing chord in between other chords. So, and it's really striking when you start really kind of messing around with it. Take a look at this movement. This is the one that I opened up with. This is a very Beatles, John Lennon type of thing here. We've got A, and then I'm going to raise that fifth, and we get into our A augmented. So that, right now, the augmented chord is going to be serving as a bridge between the 1 chord and the minor 6 chord, which is F sharp minor. And then it's a very easy motion to get to A7, A dominant 7. And take a look at the bass string and watch how we are basically just doing a chromatic walk up here. Isn't that cool? Now just follow that up with some major 6 and minor 6 action. Or rather, 4. We're going to do a major 4, which is D major, and then we're going to do a minor 4, which is D minor. And this is that typical awesome heartbreaking move that you hear in songs like In My Life by the Beatles. Cool stuff, huh? So you'll notice that we're just moving. At that point, it doesn't even look like a chord because we're only moving 1 note. Notice that these two aren't even really changing position at all. And just by moving 1 element of the chord, not only have we introduced movement, but we've also introduced a sort of thematic thing where we've got just 1 line that sounds like it's escalating. And again, there is that whole resolution to the root. So if I've got my augmented here, and then I go to the 1 chord, in this case, which is D, that's a very strong resolution. And notice once again, we've got this half-step move. In this case, we've got a parallel group of notes that are going in one direction. Sounds like the Looney Tunes ending, doesn't it? I like to use diminished chords in blues music, and especially in this whole head to the tune. It's delightful stuff. And oftentimes you'll find, whether you're working with augmented chords, diminished chords, the major, the minor 6, the suspended, all we're doing is typically we're taking an element of that chord, not the whole chord and just shifting it all around, but just 1 element of it and maybe moving it this way and that way. They always say change 1 thing with a recipe, or change 1 thing, you know, when you're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So when you got those chords and you're playing with them, those chord shapes, change 1 thing and see what happens to the quality of that chord. And that's when you're going to start kind of running into these different chords we've been talking about over the past 6 weeks. And you may not know what they're called right off the bat, but hopefully what you've learned this past series will help you to identify the personalities of all of these different chords, and you'll just kind of be able to go with what you like as opposed to trying to remember all of the different bits of music theory that helps put this stuff together. So if you have any questions about this stuff, please don't hesitate to drop me a line at bingfutch@yahoo.com. This has been just a lot of fun, you guys, and I'm not sure what the next series is going to be, Next week's show is a Christmas show. I'm just going to play some music. And then we're going to see where we go from there. So if you have any suggestions on things you'd like to see, drop me a line and I will put it in the queue. Hope you had a blast. Hope you had half as much fun as I did. And I'm looking forward to sharing some more music with you into the new year, 2021. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and season's greetings to you all. And Happy New Year, but I'll be seeing you before then.